Well, let's start with what I consider to be the two big turning points of the game, Jeff, and that really was on the offensive side of the ball. The first thing is the Steelers gave the Giants a gift right off the bat when Deontay Johnson muffed the punt. So the Giants are taking over right on the goal line, essentially. You have a 1st and goal, and the inability to punch it in, that was a missed opportunity. And then the second missed opportunity, of course, later in the game, second half, third quarter, they put together by far their most impressive drive of the game, 19 plays, 87 yards. Once again, knocking on the door right near the goal line. Daniel Jones on a 2nd down, unfortunately holds on to the ball too long, doesn't throw it away, gets hit by Bud Dupree. Ball goes up high in the air. Cam Hayward, easy interception. And the Giants have only 3 points between both of those opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, and again, we talked about this team from the beginning, even before the season started, that this offense is going to have to put some points up on the board because we didn't really know what the defense was going to give you, right? Well, listen, I think if you take those 2 plays and the Giants get into the end zone, this is a whole different ball game. But you can't. So you got to learn from these. And I think that there was some, I don't know what went down on that miscommunication between Ingram and Daniel Jones in that situation, that pass. I know that he kind of just stopped, and it looked like Daniel Jones thought he was going to be going more towards like a route. So it just kind of misfired there. But, listen, the Steelers handed them a gem right there, and, could have went up 10-0. And that's a good place to be in. The other one is, that drive, and we went over this last night in the postgame show, 19 plays, 87 yards. I think what comes out to me, what sticks out is that the ability for this team to overcome some of the mistakes that they made and, leading up to that. But they couldn't punch it in. But I do look at some of the glasses half full. They converted a 3rd and 14, a 3rd and 1, a 3rd and 5, a 3rd and 6, a 3rd and 3, and a 4th and 1 to extend those drives. And I think that's something to be excited about. And really, you just kind of look at that whole thing, you get nothing out of it, and that's hard to take. But, I think that Daniel Jones is going to learn from this. I think this whole team will learn from those 2 things. But certainly those were 2 of the bigger points of the game.
Well, to your point, 4 of 5 on 3rd down on that 19-play drive. So that is certainly an encouraging takeaway. Plus, the 3rd down efficiency was much better, Jeff, in the second half versus the first half. First half, they were just 1 of 6. Mm-hmm. A lot of 3rd and longs. They had a 3rd and 27 and a 3rd and 18. And part of that was the inability to run the ball, which we'll touch on in a little bit, as well as a few procedural false start penalties. So you never want to be put in a precarious spot like that, having to play catch-up, because that's what haunted the Giants in previous seasons. But your point is well taken about the efficiency of 3rd down. Second half, they were 7 of 9 on 3rd down. But I want to piggyback off of your larger point. I put it to the equivalency of, in baseball, Jeff, at bats. And what jumps out to me is the Giants only had 3 possessions in the second half.
Yeah.
Right? Yep. One of those 3 possessions took nearly 9 minutes off the clock. And when you're only going to have 3 possessions, they clearly didn't know that at the time, but let's look at it big picture perspective. You only have 3 possessions. You have to be able to capitalize on each and every one of those possessions when you're playing from behind. And that's why that drive was so costly, because you only had then 2 possessions after that. You wound up having a 3 and out, and then, of course, you scored the touchdown. But at that time, the Steelers are in prevent defense. So it was so significant because it took so much valuable time, Jeff, off the clock, and you have nothing to show for it.
Yeah, and at the point that's 3rd quarter, it's 16-10. The game is very, very close. I mean, they punch it in there and get a touchdown, an extra point. It's 17-16. I think there might have been maybe 5 minutes left in the 3rd quarter at that point. And, now you got a whole different ball game. But, when you don't have that many possessions, 2 things. One, you're taking the ball away from your opponent, which is a good thing on a long drive like that, 87 yards. But you got to come out with points. And if you don't, you're delaying the inevitable. So you're down 16-10 with 0. You didn't score anything there. And then, your defense is sitting there waiting to go back on the field in the same score that they took the team off the field when you took it for 87 yards and got nothing. So it's important that they get some not only the possessions. When they only have 3, you got to get points out of there. You're spot on. I don't want to bring this up, but I do want to bring this up, and I think I don't know when I wanted to bring it up, but I'll do it now. There was a play in this game early in the first quarter. basically the series after the punt, the fumbled punt where the Giants got 3 points. There was a situation where on third, there was a fumble that was, Daniel Jones went back to throw, and I don't know if his arm was in motion, it fumbled, the ball went forward, Nick Gates recovered it and went into the end zone. I don't, we didn't talk about this at all last night on the show. I'm wondering about a challenge there from Joe Judge. I know they didn't show much of it on the broadcast, but I was just curious to get your take on that. If you thought that should have been a challengeable play by Joe Judge.
Well, interestingly, Joe Judge was not asked about that play in his post-game media session because I thought maybe somebody would have brought that up, and we played that on the post-game show. I went back and listened to it this morning, and I went back and watched that play again. Now, from what I got clarification on, and I know the official analyst on the broadcast brought up that in his perspective, it would have been a touchdown if the play was challenged because only when you're talking about plays within the 2-minute warning and at the end of each half, Jeff, are there restrictions on whether or not the ball can be advanced off a fumble? Normally, it's the player that coughs up the ball is the only player that then under those circumstances can recover it and advance the ball. But this was outside of the 2-minute warning. So from how I understand the rule interpretation, he would have been eligible, Nick Gates, to move the ball forward and get into the end zone. It's going to be interesting to hear if Joe Judge is asked about that, as you brought up, Jeff, when he meets with the media later today. But here's the way that I look at it. Even if the Giants do get a touchdown there, there's so much more missed opportunities, Jeff, that we can sit here and analyze that played out over the course of the game, where the Giants are probably saying to themselves a day later after watching the film, we do this, we do that, hey, maybe the game turns out differently, especially, of course, that 19-play drive.
Yep, a lot of things you can go and, it's what we do on Monday mornings, right? Or it's Tuesday mornings. But we analyze the games and we kind of go back and say the ifs and buts were candies and nuts and all that kind of good stuff. So, but I think that the overall takeaway, and I think that a lot of people will I don't want to get carried away with the moral victory. I don't want to get carried away with the team looked good because they did. They looked good in certain areas. They looked bad in other areas. But I just want everybody to understand that at some point in time, we have to understand that this team needs to win. They need to win some games, and that we're not going to just be – I don't know when the honeymoon period will wear off as far as the discipline and the team is looking better and, hey, they're doing this, they're doing that, but they're not winning. They had a chance to win this game last night. Believe it or not, the way we break it down, and if there were some ways that, things went their way and they just didn't shoot themselves in the foot, they could have won this game. They played a really good football team last night, a Steeler team that's probably top 5 in the NFL, especially their front 7. But they've got to correct some things and a lot of work to do. But I was overall impressed with the way that the team did play. I thought all of them, that nobody gave up, which was nice to see. I thought the energy was there. I do think that some of the adrenaline and some of the conditioning, and I think it's going to be league-wide, kind of ran out for the Giants in the second half a little bit. If you notice that there was that defensive line rotation, those big boys, they get tired. And so, some of those guys didn't play all the defensive snaps because they were rotating guys in there. So as the season goes along, those guys will get a little bit more plays.
Well, and that was something we talked about leading up to the game, Jeff. There's a distinct difference between being in shape and then being in football shape. Not to say the guys weren't in football shape, but they didn't go through a 4-quarter game.
That's right.
Prior to last night. So it's understandable that some of these guys could very well be gassed come the fourth quarter. As you hit on, I agree with your assessment. Giants were very much in the thick of this game late in the third quarter when they had that 19-play drive. It was still a one-possession game. That was the turning point because then, of course, the Steelers tacked on a field goal, made it a two-possession game, and Pittsburgh really started to gain its rhythm on offense and wear down the Giants' defense. But the reason why I guess you could say it was a bit surprising that the Giants were still in the game at that point, Jeff, is what I alluded to earlier. You look at the box score, Saquon Barkley had 15 carries for 6 yards. 8 of those 15 carries were for negative yards. A bulk of them, Jeff, as we talked about last night, he was hit immediately as he was handed off the ball. So Saquon did the majority of his damage as a receiver, and that's the positive of him being a versatile running back. But this was the first game of seeing this new offensive line, and I think Pittsburgh came into this game, and Mike Tomlin confirmed it.
Yeah,
I went back and listened to his media session. He said, hey, they came into this game saying, we're going to take away Saquon Barkley. We're going to put all our efforts there. We're going to make Daniel Jones win this game, and we're going to put our secondary in a precarious spot, and let's see if Daniel Jones can take advantage. Well, if that was the perspective and the strategy going in, I would say it worked very effectively, Jeff, for the Pittsburgh Steelers defense.
It did, and I think that that Steelers front seven is something to contend with. It was a good game plan by the Steelers. It worked. And, when you have a secondary that has the names that the Steelers do, I think you can hang your hat a little bit on those guys. I think you can say, okay, guys, we're going to ask a lot of you this game, but hey, they're pretty good. So they relied on them, and it worked. And I feel like if you're going to go ahead and grade out the offensive line, I would grade them better in the passing game than much better in the passing game than they did in the run game.
Yeah.
There's a lot to understand here as far as an offensive line. I would love to get the take from Sean O'Hara or David Deal about some of the ins and outs of having a new player, especially a center. I thought Nick Gates struggled immensely last night, and I think it's just because it's new to him. I don't know. There's a lot on his plate for a young guy that's never played center before in his first NFL football game against a front seven like the Steelers. Lots of stuff going through his mind. I don't know how many bad calls and adjustments that he made at the line of scrimmage, protections, things like that in the run game. All these things we don't know. But I will tell you, you could see on film and watching the game that they were struggling because there was guys just coming through there. Daniel Jones would get the snap, turn around, hand it off, and there was penetration. So that'll get buttoned up. I think that Mark Colombo and Jason Garrett will come up with some schemes and things to try to help that, but they need to get in the room with Nick Gates and find out what happened.
Lance Medow, Jeff Feagles with you here on Tuesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live. 201-939-4513 is the telephone number. Hashtag Giants Chat on Twitter. You can also tweet directly at us, at Lance Medow, one word, last name, Medow. He is at J Feagles, one word as well. We're going to get to your phone calls momentarily. I want to switch gears to the defensive side of the ball. To me, the big backbreaker, turning point from the defensive perspective, because early in this game, it was very encouraging. They got some hits on Ben Roethlisberger. They got some pressure. They did not allow James Conner to run wild. But that 2-minute drill, Jeff, right at the end of the first half, it seemed as if Roethlisberger started to settle in. He spread the wealth. He was able to get Eric Ebron, Juju Smith-Schuster. And the Steelers go into the locker room when they were trailing pretty much for the majority of the first half. They take that 16-10 lead, knowing they got the ball to start the third quarter. That was, it seemed, when the Steelers said, all right, we seem to have figured out the Giants, and now we're going to try to test them in terms of their secondary. And that worked effectively in combination with what Benny Snell did in the second half.
Yeah, and the combination, you mentioned combination. It was a combination of routes that they were doing. A lot of rub routes, a lot of middle-of-the-field crossing routes, things underneath. Getting the ball in your playmaker's hands and those guys just making plays. And then you've got a 6'5", Ebron, the guy that you can throw the ball up to, and a mismatch on Jabril Peppers. That's just something you see as a quarterback when you line up and you realize that the strong safety is on your tallest guy on the offensive receivers. And then all of a sudden, Pat Graham dials up a couple blitzes. He's been known to do that, and one of them was a zero coverage, and that's where you had no safety in the game. And next thing you know, he's throwing a Hail Mary ball, what it looked like, off his back foot to the corner of the end zone for a touchdown. So I think
he put it in a perfect spot, by the way.
And that's Ben Roethlisberger. We've been seeing him make those plays for 15 years. It's just the way he does things. It doesn't look pretty, but the ball is where it's supposed to be. And so that was kind of a backbreaker. I agree with you totally, 100%.
The other touchdown, the one that he threw to James Washington over the middle, and then Washington made a tremendous second, third, fourth effort, maybe even a fifth effort to get into the end zone.
Yeah, that was a great play.
An example, Jeff, of you had two corners collide with one another, so that opened up essentially the middle of the field for Washington.
Yeah, that was a great effort. And, you love to see that out of players, whether it's somebody from your own team or the opposing team. But that's just a knack for the goal line, right? And what great athleticism to not let his knees hit the ground after he got hit, coming back down. And, he got back on his 2 feet and then pushed forward right into the end zone. So a great play by him.
As far as some of the bright spots in terms of individual performances, Leonard Williams got a lot of pressure. He was able to get a sack. Lorenzo Carter showed some flashes. How about Blake Martinez, Jeff, leading the way with 12 tackles, 8 solo? It seemed as if, and I know Benny Snell was able to get a few big runs in the second half, but the first half, every time they needed somebody to clean up, Blake Martinez seemed to be in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, we kind of knew that coming into the season, that this guy's a tackling machine, and I think that he's going to be one of those leaders every single week as long as he stays healthy as far as tackles. I think double digits is the number. You're going to look at him every week with that type of production. But yeah, he's around the football. He's a smart player. He understands what the other team's doing, and that way he's able to put himself in positions to succeed, and that's making a lot of tackles. I think what will come with some of those tackles will be some forced fumbles. I did see him get beaten a little bit in the coverage aspect of it, but he's not known for that, so you're just going to have to take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah, he was the cleanup guy in Green Bay. He made that very clear. They basically told him, chase it down, run it down, make sure you're the second layer of defense. It'll be interesting to see what Patrick Graham asks him to do on a weekly basis, considering they're going to be tested by different personnel moving forward over the course of at least the first few weeks of this season. As we are recapping the Giants' 26-16 loss to the Steelers on Monday Night Football. Before we open up the lines, Jeff, the one thing, again, that was brought up in the wake of this game, and it's something we talked about heavily in all of the games last season, was the turnover differential and how more often than not that equates to wins and losses. And the Giants were minus 17, tied with the Chargers, dead last in that category last season. Daniel Jones had 2 interceptions in this game, and the one takeaway that the Giants had, which was on special teams, unfortunately only equated to a field goal. So you're talking about the Steelers scored 9 points on their 2 takeaways, the Giants only 3, and they were minus 1. It's one game. We're not going to go crazy over one game, Jeff, okay? We got to have some perspective here. But, if that trend continues, regardless of all these bright spots we're talking about, it's going to be very difficult for them to walk away with wins.
It is because, you like to force turnovers, but they came on the special teams that you mentioned. So I think that, this defense has got to find a way to get the football, make some big plays, because that the offense is going to – well, it's just the way it is, right? I mean, Daniel Jones he's got to learn. That first interception, it's on second down. You live for one more down, okay? You throw the ball away. And by the way, even where he was throwing the football, there were still Steelers defenders all over the receiver, Slayton, for the corner of the end zone, even if he had tried to complete that pass. But, hey, that's just experience. That's you live and you learn, right? Unfortunately, at the expense of a loss. The T.J. Watt interception, that's a good player making a smart play. Yep. They were basically in a zone blitz, and he backed out of it. He read his eyes. He knew exactly where the football was going, and he just jumped up, and there was the ball. And you see a lot of times that happens. A lot of quarterbacks just don't see. And T.J. Watt, he's not that big of a guy. He's not 6'6", So he was just kind of hiding and playing little cat and mouse with Daniel Jones, but he's got to learn from those. And the one thing that this team cannot continue to do is turn the football over. Just one game, like you said, Lance. Let's not panic, but it's point of emphasis. It's point of emphasis every single day. Every time they're in the building, they talk about it. Every time they're at practice, and they got to continue to not do that in order to stay in games. Because listen, you take those turnovers away and some of the missed opportunities for scoring, the game is much different, and we don't have to talk about anything else. And we don't have to talk about 141 yards rushing against your defense. You don't have to talk about 3 touchdowns that they gave up. The game is close, and it's a matter of just a certain plays in the game you take out, and that's the difference in the National Football League.
Well, Jeff, speaking of the coulda, woulda, shoulda game, if you go back to Daniel Jones' second interception, the one that came on 2nd and 3 for the Pittsburgh 4, even if you live to see another down there, which is what the philosophy I'm sure that Joe Judge and Jason Garrett is going to tell Daniel Jones, hey, Daniel, come back on the field for 3rd and 3. It's not the end of the world, okay? Let's take another shot. Throw the ball away. Who cares? Completion percentage may go down, but the bottom line is it's all about capitalizing on possessions. Even if you don't get a touchdown there, Jeff, and you have to settle for 3, it's a 16-13 game, and now all of a sudden you're kicking off. You don't know how the rest of the game plays out. Maybe the Steelers' play calling changes. Once again, there's no guarantees in football. So I don't want anybody to say, well, if they got 3 points there, the Giants would have won. We don't know. But you could argue the game of chess, Jeff, changes if you now add a few more points. You make it a one-possession game as opposed to swinging it to 9. That is a noticeable differential.
Yep. I mean, that's, again, you woulda, coulda, shoulda. You can go through and you can go through every series. You can go play by play and pick out things that could have been done correctly and better. And I mean, you could swing it around where the Giants they win this game if they do X, Y, and Z. But that's not the way it is. You learn from those and you move on. Fortunately, it's a long season. But overall, I give this team. I think, kind of looking at the way this game was going last night, the first half at least, I saw a completely different team. I saw a team that was prepared. I saw a team that was in control. I didn't see guys completely out of sorts. I thought the camaraderie and then there was some continuity to coming together, and it really was good to see. And I'm thinking that this team will get better and better as each week goes. But you know what, Lance, we talked about this before in the preseason and in training camp, that we knew that this team was going to be somewhat like this. They're going to be disciplined, they're going to be well coached, and they're going to be prepared. They just have to learn how to win. And that just comes with experience and taking things like they did at this game and learning from these experiences. As Daniel Jones said last night in his press conference, we're going to take these opportunities to learn. Well, that's what you have to do. Sooner than later, you're going to turn the corner and start winning some football games. Real quickly, we told you that their special teams, the Giants' special teams, were going to be special. They're going to be in every single game, if not win that 1/3 of the game. You saw it with Jabril Peppers. He is exciting. He's a playmaker to get that ball in his hands. Then you had to play the fumble recovery. So there's some good things about the special teams that are going to be consistent through the season. Just got to get one of those other two, facets of the game, offense and defense, to win one of those, and you got a chance every Sunday.
Well, it's about complementary football.
That's
you got to
right.
have all the facets meet each other right halfway. The one thing, though, that I think is another missed opportunity now that you just reminded me of, Jeff, that involves special teams.
Oh, the kickoff out of bounds.
There we go.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing. This is right after the Steelers kick the field goal, right? It's a 19-10 game, Jeff. So now Boswell gives you another gift. Just like the muff punt with Deontay Johnson, you get a gift. You take over at your own 40. Great field position. And then what happens, Jeff? They go 3 and out. And they can't even get into field goal range. So there was another example where I felt watching this game, the Steelers were not in midseason form, okay? Roethlisberger came back. You could tell it took him the first half to shake off the rust. Second half, he looked much better, and they were much more fluid on offense. But the Steelers were doing everything in their power, Jeff, to say,
try to lose
the
game.
Take it, okay? Take it.
Yeah.
We want this game to be more interesting than it needs to be.
And
the Giants were like, I don't know. We're not that comfortable. Why don't you have it back?
And
I got that feeling throughout the course of the game.
Totally. And I think that if this was a better football team, the Steelers would have lost this game. If they're playing a team like the Cardinals or, just a better all-around football team, they lose this game because of those things. You can't do that. Hey, listen, you also missed an extra point. So, there's situations where you look at, and I totally 100% agree with you that if this team, they just were trying to give the game away, but the Giants just couldn't do it. They just didn't have enough firepower and in themselves to go out there and take it.